Hi guys, 14 Param here with a very different kind of video review. Now, as we all know, the Shattered Glass Sublines releases all came with an issue of the comic that they tied into. And I was going to talk about each issue in each review. However, Hasbro completely butchered the release schedule very early into the subline, so this idea didn't pan out at all. Instead, we will be going through the story of these first 5 issues here all at once. There will be spoilers for each issue, so if you wish to go in blind, this video is not for you, or at least not yet, until you read them. With that said, let's begin with issue 1. Issue 1 of the comic is from Blur's perspective, as it gives us an introduction to this world. It's established that Cybertron is in a post-war setting, where the Autobots rule the land, with Prowl's territory, Goldbug's Gold City, and Pax run by Optimus Prime. Blur is what's known as a body scrapper, which is basically just a bounty hunter. Due to them in the war, most of the Decepticons are either on the run, hiding out, or dead. He's given the task by Ratchet to hunt down Starscream, and decides to have fun with it by actually helping Starscream, pretty much just as a lie to get a good story out of it. Anyways, he gives Starscream a sob story about being on the wrong side and wants to help Starscream in whatever he's doing. I also really like this little bit where the term Decepticon was from Cybertronians who saw through the lies of the Autobot government. Sort of like IDW 1. Starscream doesn't really trust him, but he needs his help to navigate through the static zone. Think the Sea of Rust, or even the Rad Zone from FunPub's Shattered Glass universe. Starscream eventually attacks Blur, calling his bluff, and uses nearby erupting volcanoes to trap Blur in molten magma as he hardens into rock. Starscream thanks his would-be capture as he's one step closer to Megatron. Overall, I actually did really like this issue. It gave us a bit of intrigue into the world and the setting to be explored later. I like what they did with Blur as well. He was just very cocky and also gave him the G1 thing of talking faster, but he slows it down for everyone else. I also really liked how Starscream defeated him using the shots Blur fired and using his own thrusters to get the volcanoes going and, melting him in the thing. I think that just kind of shows Starscream's intelligence. And a lot of the background designs in this issue are also pretty neat, but you'll see that throughout this entire thing. I'm going to highlight a few here and there that I really like, though. And so far, there aren't plans for a Shattered Glass 6-shot custom, since I feel like someone might ask. But yeah, very solid start, especially when looking back at it after reading everything else. Issue 2 and onwards has these little roll call and story so far segments just to keep people mostly caught up. Just figured I'd mention here so I don't have to with the next 3 issues. The story begins with a cloaked Megatron standing out in the static zone, as Starscream crashes by near him. Starscream's glad to see his commander, but Megatron doesn't quite feel the same. I think this opening bit here is just really interesting, as it shows their dynamic very well in just a couple pages. It's very similar to the normal dynamic of G1 Megatron and Starscream, with a more serious Megatron and a bumbling Starscream, even with Megatron calling him a fool, but this time it just feels like it comes from a different place. Megatron brings him in after he collapses and wonders why Starscream came to him, since Megatron himself believes that he can't still be needed. Starscream basically recaps issue 1 from his perspective and almost lets a certain someone's name slip before changing the subject. Starscream then tells the tale of one of Megatron's early protests before the war. Ratbat ended up getting shaken up by Officer Prowl during the protest for being over the line, and Megatron is having none of it. He defends himself and Ratbat with only his words, getting really bad under Prowl's skin, until he mentions Orion and calling them mining trash. Then he lashes out, picking up Prowl and tossing him down. To Starscream, this event was awe-inspiring, as it was a key factor to him joining the cause, seeing Megatron declare himself as an equal, not above the people. Megatron, however, remembers this event very differently as the first time he was arrested. He was bound by chains by officers as an example as to what happens when you challenge the system. Megatron himself doesn't see this event as a big deal, despite how Starscream feels about it, and Starscream mentions having a Titan-sized target on his back and needs Megatron's help to recruit others, and Megatron cuts him off, saying he doesn't need him, he needs a leader. We then flash back again to after that previous incident where Orion bails his buddy out of jail, and we see a small hint of their dynamic. Orion being sarcastic and wanting thanks for yet cleaning up another of Megatron's messes. There's a clear distinction between the two, with Orion calling rights and empathy chaos, while Megatron uses the nearby poster of Senator Shockwave to show the injustice Orion and his secret police did, removing his face and hands when he challenged the system. Orion denies all of this and threatens Megatron into a fight where he shatters his glass and cuts ties with him. Honestly, this whole bit made me wonder how they even really became friends, or if they ever truly were. It's just, I kind of wish we did see a little bit more of that, just the beginning of them, which, who knows, maybe we might in the future. Just all wait to see. This is where Megatron really begins doubting himself, questioning his choices up to this point. A Starscream comes up, rocking his own Siege Ultra Magnus cloak.
Reveal yourself, now!
He tells Starscream he needs to seek help elsewhere, as he's no longer the leader of the Decepticons. Starscream protests, only for Megatron to lash out, calling him unworthy and telling Starscream what his leadership cost them by going back into another flashback. We now go back to the War for Earth, where Megatron talks a little about what's happened there. Apparently, he and some other Decepticons crashed there and discovered something called rarefied energon, which brought the Autobots, I presume. He also mentions Earth will never be what it once was, implying something terrible happened here. He realized the battle was lost while going up against Optimus Prime, and decided to accept losing this and becoming a martyr. However, even when everyone else left, he didn't die, so he repaired a ship and returned to Cybertron to see it in the shape it is now. Starscream, however, throws this whole thing back at him by telling him how he and the other Decepticons remember that day. He talked about how they saw him as a hero, saving Decepticons and taking down waves of Autobots all on his own. However, when Optimus arrived, Megatron ordered the Seekers to gather the troops and leave. Megatron stayed behind to buy them some time. How Starscream and the other Decepticons saw Megatron that day was not a fallen leader left for dead, defeated by tyranny, but as the hero who was willing to sacrifice his life to save his men so they could live on and fight another day. We ended this issue with Starscream showing Megatron why he needs his help to rally the Decepticons, and why he's being hunted, because Starscream believes he can wake the Titans and use them to take back Cybertron. So, I don't know if you can tell by just how long this one issue has been so far, but I just really liked it. I feel like it dives into the focus of the characters better than issue 1. I love Megatron's characterization in this a lot. It's like Fun Pub Megatron with a little bit more modern Optimus Prime without the dramatic speeches, while IDW made him a bit more like more to meets the eye Megatron to me. He still has that same vibe as a strong-willed person and one who isn't very forthcoming, which is excellently shown through his time with Starscream in this issue. While this kind of story is nothing new of a sort of fallen king, it feels very right with this interpretation of Shatterglass Megatron. A lot of other little smaller things in here were nice too, like the flashback showing off several more Autobots and Decepticons. The standout to me is Thundercracker, which his overly downward demeanor I find hilarious because he's just this bright colored thing. And I like how this shows issue 1's many shots of Metroplex's head in the background was foreshadowing. Just overall, there's so much more substance and things to love with this issue. Like, if you only read one issue out of this entire miniseries, just let it be this one. Kicking off issue 3, we have Starscream's story. One thing I didn't notice until writing this script is that across these 3 issues, there's different colors to reflect the inner thoughts of the focused character, despite the fact that in their individual issues, they're the only ones to have these. Just a weird little thing I saw. Anyways, we're back in Gold City with Megatron and Starscream just walking around in their Siege Ultra Magnus cloaks.
Reveal yourself!
I think these things are neat and all, but like, I'm legitimately amazed they can just walk the streets as if they aren't priorities number 1 and number 2 for the Autobots. But they're here to meet up with another fellow Decepticon, and it's Soundwave. Now in Fun Pub Shatterglass lore, Soundwave and his pals were some of the goofiest and weirdest of the bunch. Ravage was kawaii, and Soundwave talked in exclusively dude bro. So, obviously, they don't do that here. Ravage, from what we briefly see, is mostly just more snarky, whereas Soundwave is actually a very good modernization, with him being the morale officer of the Decepticons through Decepticon Radio. He uses it to keep in touch with Decepticons and make sure they're all doing alright. We even see him talking with a few of them as Megatron and Starscream walk in. Laserbeak is here as well, but we just briefly see him, though it does make me wonder if we're getting him and Ravage in the eventual toy, since Wave 2 is now a thing. Anyways, they plan to have Soundwave use his connections to get the attention of other Decepticons, when Starscream says something that triggers a flashback to the protest from issue 2. In that issue, you see Starscream and Jetfire in the background, but now we know why they were there. They need funding so they can dig out Metroplex's head so they can try to communicate with him, but unfortunately, it hasn't been going well getting that funding. Starscream actually agrees with some of the stuff Megatron was saying, however Jetfire is just a bit more sees it as a minor break in the law. But they're here to see Orion Pax. They explain their research to him and he says it can change what power looks like, and that he will get them all the funding they need so long as they can get results. At first the pair was thrilled until Orion says the information and knowledge from this will not be shareable to everyone, which Starscream is greatly opposed to and storms out. We go back to the present day when Starscream and Megatron are in some kind of establishment. I guess they're just going to meet other Decepticons here. They really don't say why they're just hanging out here. But this scene is mostly just to show that they've been shadowed by Eject, and then we're all put into another flashback. Now we're at the point where they've managed to get the funding, and they've dug out Metroplex's head. Even a little Shatterglass Constructicons nod here in this shot. Anyway, Starscream is absolutely thrilled, while Jetfire is more reserved here. Starscream eventually snaps him out of it until he mentions Orion Pax, and Jetfire begins to have doubts on if they will actually get results quickly before their funding's gone. He thinks if they accepted Orion's help, this wouldn't be an issue, but Starscream says he doesn't want to give their work to a tyrant, and then they agree to just drop the conversation. Once again, back to the present day, Blaster is there with his squad. He and the boys get in a tussle with Starscream and Megatron, where Megatron has Starscream leave him, since if Starscream is captured or dies, it's over for them all. Starscream isn't at all happy about this, saying he's tired of being alone, which has more or less been a background element up to this point of the story. Flashbacking one more time, Jetfire is reporting their findings to Orion when Starscream is caught eavesdropping. I don't know if this means they got their funding from Orion and Jetfire didn't tell Starscream, or if he's trying to go back and get the funding, as they don't really specify this. But if it's the first, it totally has more impact, and I'm sticking to that. The guards called Starscream a Decepticon, to which Jetfire vouches for him, saying that he isn't one. Starscream then comes back, saying the Decepticons are fighting against the control of the Autobots, and scolds Jetfire about trust. Jetfire punches Starscream, causing him to retreat. He then goes to the Titan to destroy their work so that Orion and the Autobots couldn't. However, he did try to plug into the Titan, but it was too late as Jetfire arrived. Cutting it short, both the data at the terminal and the data he carries in his Spark were corrupted, but he ended up escaping. Ending the issue after Starscream left Megatron, he tries to plug into the Titan again, which ends up working, and the data is now fully kept in Starscream's Spark, but the transfer knocks him out. He then finds himself waking up to the sounds of Jetfire and Goldbug, as now he's been captured. Honestly, this issue just feels kind of messy. I hesitate to call it bad, but it's honestly the weakest so far. We go back and forth between present day and past events a bit too much for my liking, and then just like, there's little areas here and there, like that little bit where Megatron and Starscream are hanging out. That's just one page. It's like the interesting story here was in the flashbacks, but they still need to continue the present day, so they just kind of threw whatever they could with a mix of like continuing the story, but then also some future toy advertisements with Starscream and, not Starscream, but Soundwave and Blaster. Which, speaking of Soundwave again, I really like this take on the character. Like, I'm really excited to see whatever focus issue they have for him in the future, since, you know, he is going to be in Wave 2, if the rumors are true anyways. But overall, it's got some fun elements and continues the trend of having neat background characters, even just extras, but again, to me, it's just the weakest issue so far. Quick semi-related tangent before issue 4. I thought of this as the day I was writing issue 3 stuff, but is Shockwave dead in this universe during the present day? To mention how Soundwave hasn't had anyone check up on him that's like around his level before Megatron and Starscream showed up. So either Shockwave is very well hidden, is a lower rank than he normally is, or he's dead, since we don't see him in anything else past that flashback in issue 2 for the War on Earth. Just something to think about, I guess. Alright, now on to issue 4. We once again connect past issues by showing what happened to Bumblebee after Megatron obliterated him in issue number 2. What's kind of neat here is that he uses Bug Bites colors, like the new Selects one, which I don't know if it's an intentional animated Shattered Glass homage, since that is what they were going to do, or if they just needed an evil Bumblebee and couldn't use Goldbug's colors, since, you know, he didn't really upgrade bodies, he just repainted, but it's still neat. But he's fixed up here with a new body and a new name, Goldbug. But we see that he only really got repaired because they just so happened to bring the materials to do it, not really because he was needed. And now the crew just whispers about how he's a failure, which does not sit well with him. Now we see they took Starscream back to Gold City, where Jetfire is trying to get the Titan communication key from his Spark, with hurting him as little as possible. An alarm is triggered that someone snuck into the base, which Goldbug believes to be Megatron, partially due to just the grudge he has against him for what happened in issue 2. What's interesting here is he compares Megatron and Starscream's relationship to the one he and Optimus Prime once shared, which will be somewhat explored during the issue. But as it turns out, it's Skywarp, and he's dead. Yeah, Goldbug just straight up murders him in 2 pages, but more on that later. He's mad and insulted that the mighty Megatron would just send a Seeker to challenge him, as we go back to sometime after the Autobots return to Cybertron. Goldbug is trying to tell Optimus that Prowl's up to no good, and he just doesn't care. This really makes Goldbug mad since he's just trying to help, and then Prime thanks him with a jackhammer to the chest. Prowl then comes out and asks Goldbug how we're going to take Cybertron. And I'm honestly just kind of interested to know how things turned out, like from that battle to the current setting of Cybertron. Because we're getting crumbs of context here and there, with this being one of them. We then go back to Jetfire and Slicer talking when Goldbug enters with Skywarp's head. Goldbug uses it to get a reaction out of Starscream and tells him even Megatron could be bothered to save him, and without him, he's nothing. He then orders Slicer to get a team together and kill any Decepticons in the city, and Jetfire to hurry up with the key. You'd think they'd do this anyways, but I guess Decepticons just don't matter to Goldbug like they do Optimus and Prowl. Jetfire is hesitant to Goldbug once again, causing an argument as Starscream begins to taunt Goldbug. He makes fun of him for his obsession with Megatron and for his time with Optimus, which really sets him off until the alarm goes off a second time to show the Insecticons are here. What's really neat is that it's the OG trio based on those E-Hobby clones FunPub used, as well as Venom and Ransack in brand new colors. They just bust in and start making their way through the facility, as cheerful as can be to work together again, until Goldbug the Fun Killer murders all 5 of them in 4 pages. But what's interesting here is we see Goldbug attempting to kill Optimus, unsuccessfully of course. It makes me wonder if Prowl set up Goldbug to attempt to kill Optimus Prime, which fails since he has nowhere else to go now. He builds Gold City. There's no solid answer, but just based on the imagery in the earlier scene, it vaguely makes sense to me. But Goldbug, pissed off, marches in on Jetfire and Starscream, drawing his weapon to blow his spark out of him. So when I first read this issue, it was the worst one in the series so far. However, from reading it 3 times now for this review, I actually liked it. Now, it isn't without flaws. I really don't like how insanely overpowered Goldbug is here, killing literally 6 Decepticons with a good chunk of the page count. I do find Goldbug's character and motivation to be well defined at least. He has to prove himself due to his failure in the final battle on Earth, and wants revenge on those who he feels wronged him. I think the bits of comparing how Megatron and Optimus treated their second in command was also neat, but very far and few between. I also didn't bring it up earlier since his role in the story is so minor, but yes, for some reason, Wheeljack is Slicer in IDW Shattered Glass stories, though I have a theory as to why that is later. He's also based on the Earthrise toy, which is rumored to be part of Wave 2, so, you know, maybe we're getting Shattered Glass Wheeljack soon. So overall, it's a decent issue. We don't reach the peak that was the Megatron issue, but it isn't just weirdly confusing like the Starscream one is, so it's okay. And so we've made it. After nearly 6 pages of the script here, we are on the last issue, which focuses on Jetfire. We begin with getting a sense of Jetfire and Starscream's relationship during the war. Jetfire believes the Autobots are the ones who can maintain order, so he stays with them for that protection, while Starscream does what he can to let Jetfire live, so we may one day see things from his side. I kind of wish this opening bit somehow connected to the battle in issue 2 or something, but it's definitely during their time on Earth. Anyways, with this philosophy in mind for Jetfire, even he's confused as to why he's defending Starscream from Goldbug despite Goldbug having the power here. But now Goldbug has had it, and wants Jetfire to execute Starscream and take his spark, which he's hesitant to do so just long enough to show him that Goldbug really doesn't have control here. Starscream's taunts from issue 4 and now showed him that Starscream has caused Goldbug to lose control time and time again, causing Jetfire to just punch Goldbug. Jetfire and Starscream briefly share a moment together where Jetfire feels whole again for the first time in ages, until Goldbug shoots a hole in Starscream's chest and rips out his spark. I really like the art here and how we just don't know which one of them is screaming, though it does confuse me a little as to why it looks like Prowl is here. My guess is it's just a generic as they aren't colored in. Jetfire is left in shock, not really knowing what to do. He blames himself for not believing in Starscream's dream for Cybertron and for them. Goldbug gives him a choice to get up and walk out or stay and be executed, saying it's his fault if he stays. This gets Jetfire angry and he lashes out, ripping a guy's arms off and throwing him at another. Like, jeez, the carnage in this room in the span of a few minutes is insane. He believes if the Autobots were really who they say they were, they'd have stopped the Decepticons ages ago, but since they haven't, they don't truly provide order. He's sick of both sides of this war and tries to take Starscream's body far away from here, until Megatron swoops in and causes both to fall. Jetfire, still filled with rage, yells at Megatron, who instead of fighting him, he holds him back so he can calm down. The pair stand for a moment of silence for Starscream until Megatron picks up his body and tells Jetfire they will have a memorial for him and offers a truce to hunt down Goldbug. Jetfire says he will consider it and leaves, telling Megatron that when he makes the memorial, make it something dramatic. We then cut to the best cloak game in the entire series, when we see that Slicer is contacting none other than Ultra Magnus to report on what's happened. He tells him that Goldbug has the spark, to which Magnus replies with the fact that both of the other warlords know and want it for themselves, since whoever controls the Titans controls Cybertron. So that one might have been shorter than the issue 1 segment, or just maybe around that length, but it was a pretty decent issue. We tap more into the Starscream and Jetfire relationship from issue 3, while continuing the story in an engaging way. It was neat to see Gold City get taken out of the picture as a nice way to cap off these 5 issues, but man, I'm bummed Starscream's dead. Like, I know I didn't really like his solo issue, but I still really enjoyed him in the other issues. Jetfire's character loosely reminds me of the one from the War for Cybertron Netflix series, so he might be inspired by that. He's still pretty nice, though, with his views on things, but yeah, overall, just pretty solid issue. And as for all 5 issues as a whole, they were okay. I enjoy the interconnected nature of the storytelling with all the foreshadowing and the calling on past background elements and just events for later context. Not everything was perfect, like again, issue 3 was a bit messy for me, but 4 out of 5 solid issues with one being really good to me is not too shabby. I liked seeing a lot of these designs just in something again, and even the background designs were honestly pretty cool. I am really glad we are continuing the story here, because I was really concerned that we just weren't with IDW losing the license, but I guess we are at least going to get another 5 issues. If it'll wrap up everything or not, who knows. But a few thoughts on everything, though. One, my whole Slicer theory is really that just, it is Wheeljack, but Slicer's an alias or something, which I figure since, he's spying on the Autobots for Ultra Magnus, maybe it is. Or who knows, it was just a weird oversight. Also, weirdly enough, Optimus Prime doesn't do a lot in these stories. Like, he's in it, he's there in, I think every issue in some way, shape, or form, but he just doesn't really do much. I hope we get a little bit more of him in future issues. And even Magnus showing up at the end was great. Really want to see what he's cooking up. Even if I don't like the new toy, I still want to see what this new take on him does in the lore. If I had to rank these issues from best to worst, it would be issue 2, 5, 1, 4, and then 3. But with that, I think that is pretty much all there is to say on these issues. So, please be sure to check out my channel for video and custom reviews, and please don't forget to subscribe. You can also come check out my Facebook and Tumblr pages, links in the description below. And this is the 14th Prime, signing out.